Good morning, everyone. I'm Miriam Gaytan. I'm the Director of Operations for the Maintenance and Facilities Services in Dallas ISD as well. So before we get started with our presentation, I'd like to give you a little background about us and where we started. Chris and I started our careers on the campus as teachers with students in a building, in a classroom, where the doors shut, and then, it was survival time, especially at the beginning. And so we carry that with us always in the world we live in today. Let's look at our district and where we live and work. We have approximately 29 million square feet with 950 custodians that oversee that square footage. Look for the care of our buildings, cleanliness, and then also look for the issues to report to our maintenance folks. We also have 240 campuses, 35 central sites, with a small but mighty maintenance force of 300 that are readily available to serve our campuses on a daily basis.
All right, so with an organization that size, you definitely have to be very intentional in how you shift or turn that cruise ship around or hit it in the right direction. So throughout the presentation, we'll talk about a shift from this screen, for example, from left to right. So from passive leadership to transactional leadership to transformational leadership and a transformational organization. So I think all of us that are in the facilities realm are pretty good at the transactional piece, right? It breaks, we fix it. We give you a work order, you go fix that work order. Where we had a gap initially and are working and striving toward is to get all the folks at the table for all of us to solve those problems and get everybody involved in that conversation. And so throughout, you'll see we move from left to right across this board. We want to give you some ideas and best practices to get that shift from left to right. So kind of a visual representation of what that might look like. So as most of us live in, you have your, like for example, our 4 different crafts here. So maintenance, grounds, MEP, environmental, health and safety. And so a work order comes into the system, that specific group gets the work order, goes out to the campus, makes the repairs, makes the adjustments, closes that work order, and they're done, right? That's really simple when it's a simple one-step work order, but like we all know in this room, a lot of the issues we have are multiple steps. We have multiple crafts that to be involved. We have to finish out what was repaired on the other side. So what we try to do is shift from this straight line model on the left-hand side of your screen to the right-hand side, which is more of a collaborative effort. So what we want to do is put that work order in the center, or that task in the center, and put our crafts around the outside of that. So that way you have all 4 of those areas focused on that one thing to get that solution-based mentality and shift into that transformational leadership for all of your folks at the senior leadership table, but also the folks in the field as well.
So how do we move from transactional to transformational? So we have to be very focused and take those best practices we learned that we saw worked on the campus and apply those to the needs of our maintenance department. Our 3 big rocks are culture, data-driven decision-making, and our professional learning communities, also known as our PLCs. So let's start with culture, and let's start with what it's not. So culture is not fluff. Culture is not toxic positivity. Culture is not pretending. Everything's flowing, and everything's working. Everyone's happy, and it's all 100% effective all day long. What culture is and what it brings about is a mindset change. And as leaders, Chris and I have to be the ones to model it. We have to model it. We have to be intentional about looking for those positives, those wins. In the maintenance world, very, very much so important to look for our issues and to solve issues, but it's also important to look for the gains, the wins, and not just the losses. And so we model it by being very intentional and looking at those and recognizing our stars. So we have things like our wall of stars pictured above, where people that are shouted out are placed on that wall. We spotlight people in our monthly newsletters, and then we take opportunities where we can gather all of our folks together, as you saw on that slide before, the people wearing their pink shirts. We celebrate those opportunities where we can join in fellowship for a cause, and that's our 3rd annual breast cancer awareness walkathon that we just had a couple weeks ago. We also practice distributive leadership, where regardless of the rank and structure of our organization, which Chris will talk about in a minute, we get everybody at the table. And everyone has a voice, and everyone has the capability of coming up with a solution to our issues. And so we try to, we encourage that with our PLCs, which we'll talk about in a little. We're also very proud of our growing our own, the history of growing our own folks. We are intentional about looking during these PLCs, we're looking for people that have that skill set, that leadership skill set, and then we look to strengthen and encourage and build those folks so that they come up in leadership within our organization as well. We cross-train within orgs. We've got lots of orgs, but we bring them all together and we encourage them to share, as Chris said, put that work order in the middle and share how we're going to work together to solve that issue. We call it thought partnering, and we're all thought partners. And again, everyone has a voice. This is our operations guide. Besides it giving you, it'll give you the name, it'll give you the position and the contact information of our folks. It also, not only does it do that, but it also builds the perception of our maintenance department as a professional department, which is what it is. So whether that's changing that perception from the campus folks or ourselves, our operations guide lends itself to that. We have provided a QR code. One of the things we like to do is provide takeaways during presentations, and so that will lead you to the digital link for our operations guide.
Right, so once again, intentionality. So we definitely chose culture first. That is the most important thing you can do as an organization is reset and set that culture, what you strive to achieve. And so what we've done in the organization is set that culture first as well. And so until you can have that culture set in a safe place to do that, it's hard to go through the actual data and have some hard conversations. So now that we have the culture set, now we look at our data-driven decision making. So remember, once again, moving to transformational, you've got to have your folks thinking forward and thinking ahead and working together to do that. So our data-driven decision making, we have what we call the weekly report. And so the weekly report comes out every Monday morning, and it pulls the data that we want to focus on as an organization. So you can have your folks. We prefer not to have our folks, our technicians in the field, sitting behind a computer pulling work order data, pulling data for that. So we want one outward-facing report that shows these items. So it's a 2-page document. On the front, and I'll do a closer view for you to see it. On the front, we have all of our finances. And so we have the core 3 groups we work with, which is the budget department, the procurement department, and the accounts payable department. So we have those focus points that shows you a track from week to week, and you can see the progress throughout the year for our folks to see that. And then at the bottom, we have the HR piece, number of vacancies, number of positions available, and all of those things. So it's a quick reference guide for our folks to see where we stand and where we stand based on the week prior to that. Then on the back side, we have all about work orders. And so we have strategically pulled these items as our focus areas. We have some internal goals we work on that are divided out on this. We also have some reds and greens to draw attention to areas we need to focus on or areas we want to celebrate. And so like Ms. Gaytan said, she said that you want to have not just the great things happening. That's important for sure, but you also want to be able to have those hard conversations and show where your red area is at, where your needs are at, where your focus areas need to be at. So this does that for us. And so what happens is this is like it says in this first slide, this is about out and up. And so this goes out through our entire organization, down through all the way through our tech level. It also goes up through the chief's level and the senior leadership for the district to see what we're working on as well. So it gives you a chance to celebrate, show progress, show needs for your folks inside, but also your folks on the outside. And so this is also divided by organization, so it's a drill down opportunity for our folks as they go through it. Okay, so now you have the culture built, you have the data-driven decision-making in front of your folks to see, but now do you just turn them loose and say, go fix these reds in the sheet? Well, that'd be great if you could do that, but you also want to be intentional in that piece as well. So we take building a safe culture, then we give them the data to make the decisions with, and then we put them in what we have referenced before as a professional learning community. So now we're taking that true traditional organization, which is what we see here. So we have all the different crafts and all the different directors, all the different managers, all in straight lanes here, right? And so this is a very traditional model where it breaks, we fix it, one org fixes it, they take care of it, and they pass it to the next org. We wanted to change that back to the circular method here, where the work order, the task, the goal, the red area is in the center, and then you have each of those groups on the outside of that setup. And that way you have all the decision makers, all the problem solvers at the table with you, with that one task, that one focus right there in the center. And so we went to this model to help our folks have better conversations and to take the data and then show that with our PLCs.
So Chris and I know what it's like to be in that classroom. And when an issue comes up with our rooms and we are waiting on someone to come by, what we don't want to happen is for the wrong craft to come by and look at it and say, that's not my problem, and leave that educator there waiting and hoping that someone would come and solve that problem. So we don't want that. And so with a transformational leadership model, all of the orgs are at the table, literally. We have general maintenance, our MEP, grounds, and our EHS are together with that work order in the center. And if it's going to take 3 steps to fix that problem, we have all the players there to discuss the plan. So how do we create that other than, like Chris said, we show them the data, we have the grows and the glows all in our meetings, but we also, how do we make sure that happens? So we are very, again, we structure our agenda to fit those needs and to make our PLCs effective. And so we start out, as you can see in that first page, a closer look, we start out with something called good things, every PLC. So every 2 weeks when we're meeting for these PLCs, we start out with something called good things that highlights the things that have happened in the last 2 weeks. And again, it's intentional for us to look for those because they're there. And so we highlight, we let them know, we present them then the weekly report, which Chris just showed you, and sometimes it has a truth and sometimes it's a hard truth. A lot of red, a lot of things grows that we need to talk about and focus on. We also go over the events that are coming up in the next 2 weeks, so they're focused on that too, and they're going to sit together and talk about how we're going to make all of those events successful. We then break out into our sessions. Once they're given their charge, their task, then they break out into these work sessions to, again, tackle the tasks of the day.
All right, so to kind of wrap up the big rocks and the big pieces. So we talked about these, so culture, data-driven decision-making, and personal learning communities. So you've seen how we've structured our folks to make it safe for them to have conversations. You've seen how we've changed the lens of our folks, what they look for, what they're taking away each day to focus on that positivity, to find solutions, to get to that yes mentality. And you've seen how, because we made it safe for our folks, then we were able to shift them into looking at specific data. And so we, as a senior leadership team, have been intentional. We give our folks in front of them to make those data-driven decision-making skills, those data decisions every day. And then the last thing is we structure how we have those conversations. So we take the data we want to share with them, and we build for them, and then give them those structures to have those conversations. And then ultimately with the goal of shifting from a transactional organization or transactional department into what a more transformative one that allows you to be more preventative, to be more predictive, and also have a more of a proactive approach, and to shift that whole mindset, that mentality for all your folks from the senior staff all the way down to the tech position for us to have that positivity and that focus as a group.
And last but not least, we want to thank you for your attention today. Our contact information is provided via the QR code. Should you have any questions or need any those materials that we showed you, email to you. We don't mind sharing. Oh, we also are leaving you with a little parting gift. We have our Chief Operations Officer who is so kind to pass out a stylus pen for you guys today. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, boss.
Let's give it up for Chris and Miriam. Are you open to having some questions asked from the audience?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Does anybody have a question? Okay, I'll go to you first, and then we'll go to you.
Thank you all so much. From Baltimore City here, how do you build a shift when the mindsets are different in terms of this is how we done it, or our people don't have the capacity, quote unquote, to take on this new work order system? Where that, how do you build? It's easy to get people together at a table, but then people still, after the meeting, go back to their silos. So how do you break that and help them understand? I always tell my teams, schools cannot operate without operations. You can't teach in a cold classroom, right? You can't even begin to worry about hallway transitions when the front door is broken, right? So these are things that I would say that operations is instrumental in education as well in the academic world.
Excellent question. So we're not up here telling you that we did this like in a month and a half, right? So this is about 3 or 4 years worth of intentionality with the focus and the shift of the mindsets. And so even today, if you were to come visit us on one of these PLC days, you'd have 1 or 2, naysayers that would have the conversation. But the goal is, if you can shift the bulk of your folks' mindset to change, and to focus on that, then they'll kind of, eat the weak ones kind of thing, right? And so, but it will take multiple years to shift that mindset and shift that change. So we still hear, even like our one-on-one check-ins with our senior staff, so we still hear things like, why do I still have this checklist? I'll take care of it, don't worry about it. Or why work orders are up because we just had a freeze. They're going to be up no matter what. So why you got to show it's red now, even though we know they're going to go up? So I had these 10 events to cover. I couldn't close work orders this week. And so one thing is we want to make it safe for them to share that with us, right? So that's one thing is you don't just discard them and say your points or your questions or your concerns aren't valid, but it's about, will you share that with the group to find some solutions? And so you see the yes mentality on one of our slides. So can you shift that mindset to where here's my issue, but here's an idea how to fix it? And so this slowly starts to shift the mindset, what the conversations are. But we would be lying to you if we said that we don't have, a 10% still that still is focused on how we did it 30 years ago, or that school, they built it wrong from the start, or something like that. That we don't want to try to find that solution or partner it with. That's the whole key piece there. And so you try to push, the majority of your folks in the right direction is what I would say first, and then hope that the ones that don't want to get on board with that shift start to make some adjustments in their mind also. But I think that's why this culture piece is so important. So we have to really try to find ways to find positivity. And so I'll just be real transparent. This event is spectacular. It's awesome, but it stresses me out. And so I can tell you, even as a campus principal, I hated pep rally days because it was everybody changed their whole plan, their whole schedule, and all that. So it always stressed me out. So I was like, we have a task to do, teach these kids, but now we're going to have this big party at the end of the day, and nobody teaches the whole day, right? But that was important because it kept those kids connected to the school. This is important. It's worth a day to lose some work orders to get your folks to feel like a team, feel like a true family in that group there. So.
Yeah, you can't tell them we are a family without creating these opportunities for them to feel like that, right? Then that's just false. It's a false, we're just up here not telling the truth to them, not with you guys, but with them. We look at them just like we looked at our own students when we were trying to build that culture in the classroom. I wanted my students to be safe, to lift their hand up, raise their hand, and say something that I might not agree with, but make them safe that they could be heard. And so, yes, it's also contagious. So I would say when you do have the majority, it's contagious. People look around. You don't want to. You stand out for not looking for the good, looking for the gains, right? And no one gets up wanting to fail every day. You want to get up. You want a win. And so we are teaching and breeding this culture of looking for those wins. That cannot be a bad thing.
Another question right here.
Hello, I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I really appreciate hearing that your school district connects to PLCs, because in our school district, that's for teachers. I've never heard it discussed for any other portion of our school district, and certainly not our operations and maintenance staff. So I don't know if that falls into that 3 to 4 year trajectory you just mentioned, but I'm curious, how was that always the case that they were a part of those PLC structures, or is that something that you did as part of this culture shift, and maybe recommendations you have for how those staff could be viewed in the same way of needing this development time and this planning time?
Yeah, excellent. So so we've always called it PLCs since we've joined the maintenance department. But also in transparency, if you were to go ask one of our senior staff and they say, what do you call those Wednesday things y'all do? They would say, the one when y'all meet and tell us about stuff. it might be, so they may not necessarily know the verbiage of that, but they know that, the professional learning community for us is important because the verbiage makes sense to us, it makes sense to our folks in general. But I think the what you label is not quite as important as what's actually happening in the action. If you think that it might have a negative connotation where that's what teachers do, we're not teachers, we don't do that kind of stuff. So maybe you structure it as a collaborative group or a collaborative session, or just a data-driven decision group or something like that. So you might change the verbiage of it a little bit so you're not, muddying the water where you have the other part. And so we had a really good victory that our chief has, that even Teaching and Learning came out to visit our PLCs to see the structure of that some too. So it helped our folks to see there's value in this. So the folks that we think are the best at these collaborations, the teachers, have come out to watch us actually do that in session as well. So I think it's what they do in those sessions looks exactly like a PLC in a campus. What they call it in the hallways, what they call it back at the shop, is probably not PLCs. Might have some other terms for it, but what's happening in the actual functionality of it is very important to us. And so you may look at just the verbiage of it, what you call it, so you don't get that kind of negative connotation of, now you're bringing the classroom over to us here. So,
Any other questions? Just one quick thing. You're wearing a blanket. And I don't blame you. I don't want anybody getting hypothermia. We are working to warm the temperature in this room, just an FYI, okay? Question over here, Mr. Sanchez.
Might put a work order in to get the AC.
Thanks, Chris. Great presentation. A question for you is, have you been able to convince the finance side that you could tie this to financial rewards, for one thing? Because I just had a meeting with my maintenance leaders, and the big issue that they have is that there's no way for them to reward their top performers. Everybody gets paid, gets the same raise. Everybody gets the same. The evaluations don't mean anything when it comes to salary compensation. So is there a way that you could try to tie this back to rewarding people who are doing a great job?
Yeah, so we would love to have some sort of incentive piece. So we don't have that currently. We've had some conversations and done some training around what it might look like possibly in the future. And so we do have in Dallas ISD a teacher excellence initiative where the teachers do have a performance-based, and campus administrators have a performance-based evaluation. They can receive bonuses, those kind of things. So there's been some conversation about a central staff piece like that happening in the future. But I think it would be, so when that started having a conversation, we were happy because we have some really some close looks at data currently. Because if you have been a part of, so I came from a school district that did not have a performance-based pay, and came to one that had to evaluate a teacher where I had a control over what he or she was gonna make in the classroom. That was a lot of pressure on the evaluator. And so if you don't have that same culture built in that first conversation, when you say, well, your neighbor just got $1 an hour raise and you get the normal 3%, that's a tough conversation to have. So we feel like, one, we would appreciate that conversation for sure. But two, we're in a good shape because we've started to look at data closely. So I would say if that's coming down the pipeline, you better make sure that your folks feel safe, understand their instructions, understand their process, and understand how we track data to build that foundation. So I think it'd be excellent because it would definitely put a lot more value on what they do each and every day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.